We all live incredibly hectic, busy lives, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So in this video, I'm going to be exploring themes of how we can use crafting to relax and just take some time away from the craziness of the modern world. If you're new here, my name is Becca and I'm a hand spinner, knitter and all-round creative type, and you're very welcome to my little fibre art space in my home in West Wales. So over the last couple of weeks I've been sharing how I've been struggling a little bit with overwhelm, and that overwhelm has been brought on by a mixture of things, and one of them being that I am neurodivergent, and so I do tend to get a bit overwhelmed. I'm not great at prioritising things. I was diagnosed by an educational psychologist when I was a kid, but it was the early 1980s. It was considered that girls did not get ADHD. They, just that was for boys. Girls didn't have it. Yeah. Yes, they do. And they did back then. Anyway, so I was told I was dyslexic, and for 40 odd years, that is kind of what I thought it was. And it wasn't really until the last couple of years that I've kind of gone, oh, I've got ADHD as well, haven't I? Yeah, it's really common to have dyslexia and ADHD together. If you have recently been diagnosed, then I've got a couple of podcasts I'm going to recommend for you. I mean, maybe even if you haven't recently been diagnosed, maybe it's something you've lived with for all of your life and have known about it, but I'm still going to tell you. So there is, the Mel Robins podcast, and Mel covers lots of subjects, but in particular she has got quite a few podcasts about being diagnosed as dyslexic and ADHD later in life, so she's in her 50s. I will say she does use some quite fruity language sometimes, so if you listen to podcasts with younger children, or you watch YouTube with younger children, maybe not one for when the kids are in the room. Then the other one, who most definitely does not use fruity language, is Karen, I can't read my own writing, Karen McGill, and she is ADHD, and she is an ADHD coach, and she gives lots of really helpful advice and tips, and certainly those tips are something that I have been implementing over the last few weeks, so that I'm kind of feeling a lot less stressed and frustrated and overwhelmed. So I just wanted to kind of add that because I've had some lovely comments, some really supportive comments. It has resonated with quite a lot of people, what I've been going through. So thank you so much. And I will link both those channels below, and hopefully you'll find them interesting. Right, so I've got a knitting pattern to share with you, which I will share in a moment. And I've got some works in progress. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so one sock done, one yarn cake ready to go. So suffering a little bit from the second sock syndrome, but these were a pattern from, from Spin to Knit, out of print, but lots of secondhand copies available. Again, I will link them in the description below. So it was published by Interweave about 3 million years ago, because all my books are about 3 million years old. Can't see. Really should have prepared this. So 2006. So nearly 20 years old, but some really great knits in there. And it is the Pippi sock. So this is hand spun yarn. It was hand spun as part of the knit along that My Woolen Mitten did back in March. Can you believe it? It was a really long time ago. So it's 3-ply, and I normally don't knit socks with 3-ply. I normally knit them with 2-ply because I just find I can't get a good 3-ply at sock weight. So this is in fact double knitting, and double knitting is roughly 11 wraps per inch. if you're new to hand spinning, then really don't worry too much about it. But wraps per inch are only ever a guide. So however you spin, you have to do a tension square. If you are new to knitting with hand spun yarn, the most important thing you can do when you're going to knit with your yarn is actually knit up a sample and a tension square or a gauge square. And I get confused. I think in the States you probably call it a gauge square. I'm pretty sure it's a gauge square. And I ask this question every time I talk about it because it just doesn't stick in my head as to whether it's a gauge square or a gauge swatch, because I know that as a tension square. And that's kind of where our two knitting languages differ. And I'm going to talk about the difference of knitting languages when I talk about this pattern I've got for you, because definitely there are some abbreviations that are British abbreviations that I'm quite sure are different in the States. But anyway, we'll get on to that. So yeah, halfway there, and kind of came to a full stop, because I really came to a full stop with everything, and I just needed to stop and reassess and clear some space. And I actually went through my, I don't know whether it's in shot actually, but there is behind me my boxes of yarn and my boxes of fibre and a big box of fabric, and I kind of went through it all, and I've got a big list of projects that I'm going to go on to later. Okay, so that's project number one. So the other thing that I've been working on, and I've nearly finished, is this, which is going to be a gilet. And again, it's knitted with hand spun, but you can see it's big, fat, juicy woolen spun. And it was really good fun to spin, and it's been really quick to knit, which has been such a bonus. I've needed some quick wins the last couple of weeks, and this has been one of them. I've literally got, I think I've just got a bit of shaping to do here, so probably, I don't know, same amount again of knitting of that, and then put it together and done. I love these sort of gilet type garments. They're great for the spring, great for the autumn. I know we're kind of in spring at the moment, but if you are in the southern hemisphere, then you're just going into autumn. So I will share the book. Again, it's another one of my very ancient knitting books. This was written in, come on, it was written in, oh well, can't find it. Anyway, it'll be about 20 years old. The problem with these books that are written at least 20 years ago, and it is a problem with all vintage patterns, is they are not very size inclusive. So you are going to have to do a little bit of maths quite often to get the size that you need. And I quite often have to do a bit of maths with cardigans, because I find that I've got quite long arms and quite a short body. I'm all limbs. I'm arms and legs, quite a short body, and yeah, I have to do a little bit of maths. But if you knit with hand spun, you are going to have to get used to doing a little bit of maths. It's not hard maths generally, and I'm gonna try and put in the plan somewhere as to how I actually do those calculations. And another resource I'm going to share with you is Bex from the Tiny Fibre Studio has just put out a really, really good video about grist. And grist, if you're not a hand spinner, you might not have come across the term, but grist is the weight of the yarn in proportion to the length of the yarn, I think is the easiest way of putting it. And she has just done this brilliant video. It explains it really, really well, and I'm going to link it in the video below. I suspect I couldn't make a better video, so you know, I don't like to reinvent the wheel, so I'm just going to link that one because I think it's great. Okay, next off, knitting pattern. Right, let me just go and get it. Okay, so ages ago, I said I was going to share this knitting pattern with people on my newsletter. and I just got really stuck with the whole technology of actually kind of getting it to upload. So I've sort of scrapped that idea, but you can still get it, because I've just copied it and uploaded it to Ravelry, and I'm going to link it in the description below. Gosh, there's going to be a lot of links in the description today, aren't there? Link it in the description below. I also will send it out as a link to my newsletter readers, and that should go out either Tuesday or Wednesday. And yes, there has been a bit of a hiatus in the number of newsletters that have gone out. One went out this week, so I was really pleased to actually kind of get back on track, because it shouldn't be something that's difficult for me to do, because it is just part of everything that I do, and it's part of my routine, and it's planned in, but just my plan just got blown out of the water the last few weeks. So yeah, back on track with that. Okay, so I thought it would be fun to do a sort of knit along, and I asked everybody to vote on which pattern they particularly liked, because I've got several of these patterns, these sort of tea cozy, coffee pot cozy patterns, and this was the one that came out on top. So this is the one I'm going to knit. Now I'm going to do model A, because I'm British and I drink tea, and I also make proper tea in a teapot with tea leaves, not tea bags. Tea bags are for when you're camping. Tea bags are not for when you're having a cup of tea at home, in my slightly pompous opinion. Okay, so it's written in, I would say, the 1960s, looking at the style and the colours, and also, big clue, says 9D there, which was the pre-decimal way of saying 9 pence. In this country, we went decimalised in 1971, so anything that is pre-1971 will have pricing expressed like that. So also just looking at the layout and the fonts, and in case you didn't know, sort of in my kind of work life, I actually I design stationery, so I am a little bit obsessed with fonts, and pretty sure, looking at the way this is printed, that this is going to be 1960. Sometimes you're really lucky with these vintage patterns and you will actually get a date on it. This one doesn't have one. It is out of copyright, because in the UK, anything that is over 25 years old that is a knitting pattern, and that doesn't hold true for everything, but for knitting leaflets, then anything over 25 years old, and double check that, I'm going to have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's 25 years, then yeah, it's out of copyright, so you are safe to distribute it. I could, of course, sell these if I so desired, but I don't want to, so I'm just giving it away free. Okay, so I'm going to do, as I say, model A. So the big thing that you have to do with these old knitting patterns is actually look at the tension, and also the weights, and the weights of balls of wool, because British knitting patterns are not expressed in yards, they are expressed in weights of yarn. So for my pattern, I need two 2-ounce balls of what they call Pullman wool. Okay, Serdar Pullman wool does not exist anymore. It was discontinued who knows when. So it is a double knit. I'm going to take a guess that it probably wasn't 100% wool. And the reason I say that was that sort of in the 1960s, nylon yarns, what we would now call acrylic yarns, were super fashionable, and they were cheap and people loved them because you could put them in the washing machine. They were considered new and modern, and a lot of these patterns were designed with this new modern yarn in mind. I might be wrong. It does say wool, but quite often when knitting patterns of this era talk about wool, they're actually meaning what we generally now say as yarn. So wool is not necessarily made of wool. It's the same as in the UK. You go to the wool shop, you do not go to the yarn store. I think maybe now with the influence of podcasts, and we're much more international, that maybe I think as British knitters we do say the yarn store, or we go into the yarn festival more than we ever used to. Because when I was a kid growing up, we went to the village wool shop. And when I say to Andrew, oh, I'm going to go to the yarn shop or the yarn store, he goes, oh, that's an Americanism. I don't quite know what's wrong with an Americanism, but anyway, it kind of winds him up for some reason. So yeah, quite often when we are expressing the word wool, we just mean yarn. So that's the other thing to note. Also, ounces. In the UK, to make maths easy for us, when we did that changeover from imperial, so pounds and ounces, to using grams, we sort of did a shorthand and we said that 1 ounce equals 25 grams. No, it doesn't. It's actually 28 grams. But to make the maths easy for us all, and particularly I say us all, I mean, I was a kid and I was learning my kind of maths in the kind of the mid-70s, and there was still an awful lot of pricing and weights that were done in both imperial and metric. So if I used two 50-gram balls, which doing the quick maths, that's what you would kind of guess, it probably isn't going to be enough yarn. So I'm actually going to have to use a little bit more. I'm also going to use my hand spun, so I will in fact be knitting up a sample, and I think next week's podcast will be me actually knitting up a sample of this pattern, because it is yeah, it's quite groovy. I don't normally knit stuff like this, so I'm normally quite a kind of vanilla knitter when it comes to patterns. I like quite plain knits, because I like to be able to sit down in front of the TV in the evening and just kind of knit. And it's that kind of that rhythm of knitting that I find so relaxing, which sort of brings us full circle to what I was talking about as to how we can use crafting to actually relax. So if you are somebody that finds yourself getting quite stressed with daily life, then it's really great to have a way to actually relax. And for a lot of us fibre artists, then either spinning or knitting is our way of relaxing. And there's really good evidence that doing repetitive tasks that you don't actually have to think about too much can actually be really good for your mental health. So I guess the last couple of weeks, when I've been trying to kind of reconnect with my, I was almost going to say sanity. I don't mean sanity, because I was not particularly suffering from a mental illness. I was just really overwhelmed. I was trying to get a bit of kind of balance back in my life. I found myself retreating to knitting rather than spinning. And I think knitting for me is very comforting and it's very tactile. And because I've been knitting a long time, I can just do it really without thinking about it too much. And I was just, kind of zoned out. TV was on, couldn't tell you what it was, and I was just there with that big fat yarn, just kind of knitting away, doing stocking stitch. I was very little shaping, and so I was just kind of back and forward and just relaxing. And it sort of really made me think about how we can use yarn craft as meditation. And it also made me really think about a kind of like a morning routine, and that when I am being kind of productive and all things are equal and I'm feeling very balanced, then generally I have a good morning routine where I sit down for sort of generally about half an hour, and I just do a bit of very relaxed breathing, and I actually pray, but obviously that's entirely up to you. Not suggesting that you need to become religious to relax, but I find that relaxing, and I just kind of get myself centered. And when I stop doing that, I get myself in trouble. And I think it's that time just to kind of unwind and process what's been going on, what I've got to do for the next day. And I have also found that I've got all these project ideas just racing around in my head, and I needed to get some of them out. And that I'm kind of pointing over there. That's where I've just put the basket with all the knitting on. Over there, in the basket over there. That was my way of getting some of it out. And I had too many projects on the go. So what I've done is I've written a list of projects, and I'm going to share those with you, and I'm going to come up with a way of trying to keep them out of my head but actually get some of them done. And obviously this one is, if you'd like to do a knit along, I was sort of thinking I was going to put it on Instagram, but to be honest, I've taken Instagram off my phone just so I've got a bit of mental breathing space. I'm not saying I'm going to delete it forever, because I do actually quite like it and I like being able to chat to people. I just am not in the right frame of mind at the moment for Instagram, so it's off my phone. So I don't think I'm going to do a traditional knit along. But in the comments, if you want to just leave a comment about what you're knitting, whether you're going to knit one of these, that would be lovely. I do always answer comments. I can't promise I always answer them kind of within half an hour, because I do try and sort of have a time in the morning when I'm doing what I call work. So that is when I'm doing my graphic design work, which is kind of what I do for my stationery design, when I actually sit down and answer them all. Not always, sometimes, you know, I'm kind of having a cup of coffee and I see a few messages and I answer them. But generally, I try and do them all at once when I'm sat down in front of the computer. Okay, so let's get some of these ideas out. So one of the techniques that I've been using for dealing with this overwhelm is to actually plan out my days and list all the things that I have to do and that we all have to do to kind of function in the modern world. So that's things like kind of cooking and cleaning and washing and kind of all those things that we have to do. Plus I also do a couple of hours work generally during the morning. Got to take the dog for the walk. Obviously you will know if you've been here any length of time, I am my partner's full-time caregiver, so it does mean that we are pretty much home-based most of the time, and I certainly work from home. In amongst all that, I'm also trying to fit in, because, you know, why wouldn't you, is kind of doing YouTube and crafting and gardening and all those other things. So I actually just kind of listed them all out and planned it across the day and was like, okay, actually there are not enough hours in the day for this great big list of things that I have now written down as to what I want to do and the projects that I've planned. So I need to prioritise some of them. So how am I going to do that? Because I want to do them all. They're all good fun things, and you know, I've just been adding to the list and getting them out of my head so they're not kind of swirling around like a great big ball of kind of combined colours and mixtures and blah, you know, kind of just craziness. And I think of, when I'm doing this, I think of kind of this swirling mass as a mass of yarn that's all knotted together. And so I need to just kind of pull out the different threads, put them on a piece of paper, and then just actually plan them in, because otherwise they don't get done and they just, this big mess of yarn just gets even more tangled, because it's just kind of going, oh, round and round and round and round and round. I want to do this, but I can't fit it in. So on pieces of paper. And the plan is that I'm going to put this list on separate pieces of paper. I'm going to fold them up and I'm going to put them in a jar. And when I have got time in my schedule to take on a new project, I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to plan it properly. So I'm going to write down all the steps. So if it is making a tea cozy, I need to spin the yarn. Actually, I'm probably going to use stuff from the stash, but you know, either go into the stash or get the yarn and actually kind of plan it out, do my samples. So I've actually got a list that I'm going to tick off rather than just holding it all in my noggin, because my noggin is full of other stuff. Everybody's noggin is. So That's the plan. I think one of the things about YouTube is that it makes you quite accountable, because you're sat here saying, this is what I'm going to do. And it kind of is a bit embarrassing if you haven't done some of it, isn't it? Like, I have this project that right at the beginning of the channel, I kind of said I was going to do this de-stash project, and I started spinning for it. And when I was going through my big stash of yarn, I found all the kind of half prepared yarn that was together, and I never knitted it. And it wasn't that I didn't want to do it, it's just that kind of other things overtook it and it got put to one side, and now it's just in the back of my mind niggling away at me, kind of going, I haven't done that, I haven't done that, I still haven't done it, haven't done it, haven't done it. And that is not a great thing to do. So it's on the list, and fingers crossed, when it gets pulled out, I'll actually sit down and do it. This is the plan. Is this going to work? Who knows? I'd love to know what you do and what systems you do to actually get your projects over the finish line, because I think, never mind whether you're neurodivergent or not, actually getting your projects over the finishing line can be a bit of a challenge. Okay, so on this list, and actually they're not all knitting and spinning, I want to make an upcycled denim skirt. I've got a load of jeans and offcuts of denim. I want to do that. I bought myself a kit to make a rag rug, and not a woven one, actually a one that you kind of hook through hessian. Pretty sure if you're in the States, what I call hessian, pretty sure you call that burlap, but basically it's a hooked rug. So I bought myself that kit, sat in the box. Then I also want to make some decorations and napkins and various things for when we have our family guests that come for Christmas. And generally I want to try and start my Christmas prep a little bit before December 1st. That would be good. Then I have a piece of silk that I want to turn into a silk scarf. I've got some linen that I want to make a top with. I've got a big pile of repairs I need to do, and that's the sewing repairs. Obviously I'm making YouTube videos weekly, so although I've written it down, I think the question is, do I share some of these projects? Do you want to see these projects? Or is it just the knitting and spinning that you're here for, and you don't particularly want to see these other things? Okay, now this really massive one, learn to weave tapestry. If you're really observant, you'll notice frame loom's gone. It was visually giving me stress because I was really struggling with it. I think, if I'm absolutely honest, I need to do a course, because I just have not been getting very far having not done a course. So that one actually probably isn't going to go in the jar of projects, because that is going to be quite a long-term thing. So I've parked it for the moment, and I've told myself that it's not staying in my head. It's just parked on the list of one day, but not today. Okay, the other thing, what have we got? Okay, so I want to actually do a video about spinning long draw, which was a requested video, and I do want to make it. But I was trying to do it the other day. I've kind of forgotten how to do long draw. I just don't spin it very often, and I probably haven't spun it in years, if I'm absolutely honest. I tend to do a supported long draw, which is kind of, so basically you're using two hands rather than so long draw, you've got a front hand by the orifice or near the orifice, and then you're kind of drawing back. And I was finding myself, as I was drawing back, this front hand was kind of following the other one up. So it was like, yeah, that actually isn't long draw. So yeah, I need to do a bit of practice on that, which is, something I want to do. So I'm quite happy to have it on the list. I've got a needlepoint kit that I bought myself in the box. Okay, lip balm. I have a great big box of beeswax from our beekeeping, and I want to make some lip balm, and I have all the supplies. I even have labels that I've designed to go on the lids because they're going to be gifts, and I haven't done it. So that's on the list. Obviously, I always want to be doing natural dyeing. I've also got a plan for a charity knit. You can see why I've had to write this down and why it's just been swirling around in the brain. So yeah, so I've got a charity knit I want to do, and I definitely want to share that on the channel. I've also written down, I want to learn how to juncture. It's like, what? I don't have time for this. Rebecca, come on. And I've also written down the thing that's been kind of swirling around in my brain is fabric design. Okay, so I know how to make repeating patterns because I make designs for wrapping paper for my stationery business. So I do know how to make repeating patterns, so it's not quite as crazy as like kind of, my goodness, how you I kind of know how to do the technical stuff, but designing for fabric and designing for wrapping paper are quite different. But I've got this kind of notion that I'd like to design my own fabric. So it's on the list, but I think it's going on the list of one day, someday, maybe never, rather than the list that's going in the jar for actual things I'm going to do. And then I want to make some tea towels. That's definitely going in the jar. I love making tea towels. Definitely going to do that. Let me know if you want to see the process, because I actually paint stuff and turn them into designs that you can then get printed. I've also done a thing where you do block printing, and I think I might do some block printing because that's really accessible. You can do it at home and you don't need very many supplies. So that is on the list. Okay, I just had to stop and go and get a cup of coffee because I'm losing my voice. Excuse me. Okay, we're nearly there, believe it or not. Okay, so yes, so I have a wooden footstool that I want to refurb. It needs stripping down, waxing, slow stitching. Really interested in slow stitching. Want to learn how to do slow stitching. Yeah, I think that is going on the sometime maybe never list. Then okay, what have I got? Oh, obviously, of course, making YouTube videos. So yeah, massive list of things. It is no wonder I was feeling so completely overwhelmed. And it's really, really common for neurodivergent people to kind of have all these ideas and projects that they want to do. It is impractical because we're so bad at prioritizing and realizing how long things take. We're also quite bad at starting things because we get overwhelmed with where do you start. So where am I going to start? I'm actually going to prioritize these, and some of them are going to go on a piece of paper that is going to just be next to my computer. That is sometime, maybe never, keep them out of my head, so that if I start to kind of drift off and think kind of, oh, that would be good, I could start that, I need to just look at that piece of paper and go, no, they're on the sometime, maybe never list. They're not on the to-do list. Then I'm going to have this jar with some of these projects written down so that I can start doing them and planning them properly and actually working through them logically, so we go start, middle, finish, and actually get some of them achieved. So I think, watch this space. Is it going to work? Is it a strategy that's going to work? So there you go. I've talked for far too long today, but it has kind of been lovely to feel a little bit like my old self again and kind of balanced and have a way forward. So I'm going to check in with you, and I'm going to check in with myself that I'm kind of not doing this overwhelm thing and I'm actually being a little more structured. Feel free to leave your suggestions in the comments below as to what works for you. I've got a lot of actual links and things to put in the description, so there will be quite a lot in the description of the links to the 3 channels that I've mentioned, and also to the Ravelry pattern that I've now got behind me. So I'm going to leave you with the rest of the walk that the little dog Millie and I did at the beginning of the week, and I shared some of that at the beginning of the week's video, and I'm going to share the rest of it. So until next time, have a wonderful creative week, and I will see you happy and relaxed and all my ducks in a row. And oh look, there are some pigs flying over there. Have a great time, my friend.